In the early 2000s, Daft Punk released an album that would go on to shape music for the next 20 years. Discovery blurred the line between sampling and live performance, combining chopped vocals, vintage gear, and live instrumentation to create something completely new. This is the story of Daft Punk and how a bad review set the stage for one of the most iconic sounds in modern music. The story begins in Paris in 1987, when Thomas Bangalter and Guy Manuel de Homem Christo meet at Lycée Carnot High School. And they weren't making music instantly, their connection started as most teenage friendships do.
We met in 87 at school, and we were like 12 and 13 years old.
And, starting to hang out, going to the movies, not really doing music, but listening to a lot of music.
However, Thomas's musical journey started way before their meeting, learning to play the piano at age 6. His dad's musical background also led to his interest.
My father is doing music and used to produce a lot of disco stuff. Gibson Brothers, Cuba. Ottawa, Hands Up, and things like that.
And a few years into their friendship, that love of music led to their first project, a sort of lo-fi rock band with a third member, Laurent Brocfitz, who would later go on to join French rock band Phoenix. They named the band Darling after a Beach Boys song, and their first release came thanks to an unexpected source.
The way we got into music is pretty much the very common way, like many teenagers. We were 17 and we just wanted to have a rock band like anybody. So that's how Darling came about.
We met at the band Stereolab and we hang out with them, and they asked us to do a track for their compilation and their label.
What followed was their first brush with criticism, but buried inside one brutal review was a phrase that stuck.
We put out a single which had really bad review. The English press said it sounded really like Daft Punk.
The band quietly folded after that, with the criticism still ringing in their ears. But one throwaway line in that review really stuck with them, a phrase meant as an insult that they'd soon turn into their name. And by 1991, their tastes were already shifting, and so was the music scene around them.
Back in 91, we were really into different indie stuff, lots of old rock stuff and funk and disco, but also the music from 91 was things like Primal Scream, and this was a time when they started getting into electronic music also as a rock band with the help of Andrew Weatherall as a producer.
But it wasn't just the records. Something big was happening in Paris clubs across the city.
Around 18, we started to go into clubs and raves and just discovering this whole new energy that we had lost in the rock scene in Paris. We were like, wow, we've got to do music like that.
Inspired by the music they were hearing, Thomas decided to put down the guitar and invest into some gear that would help them create electronic music.
Just got like $1,500 for my 18th birthday, and with this we just bought a small sampler, a small synthesizer, a little effect unit and a sequencer, but very, very basic, like 3 machines with a ghetto blaster just in the bedroom. And that's how we recorded our first single.
With a name they didn't choose and a sound no one saw coming, they sent their debut out into the world via a label hundreds of miles north in Glasgow called Soma. The track was called The New Wave, and Daft Punk had officially arrived. Between the release of their first single, The New Wave, and what was coming next, Daft Punk were carving out their sound, testing out tracks in Paris clubs and building out their identity as DJs and producers.
What we did was different and maybe had an influence from Chicago. So I think the best thing we did is to find an identity of sound really quick on the first album.
And that first real breakthrough came in 1995, a snarling loop-driven 12-inch called The Funk, again released on Glasgow's Soma label. When the Chemical Brothers picked it up and started playing it in their live sets, it really took off. Within months, it was everywhere, even topping the Billboard dance charts. And that momentum only grew with the release of a Spike Jonze-directed music video. And although they hadn't set out to make an album, the success of their singles led them to signing with Virgin and kicked off the process. The music they wanted to make wasn't just for the dance floor. They wanted it to have that human feel. Inspired by the warmth in R&B and hip-hop production, they set out to bring that sound into electronic music.
It's true that we find a lot of electronic music cool, but if you compare to R&B and hip-hop and rap, which is quite warm, we think, it's done with the same machines. So with a bit of training, you can really make warm things with electronic machines.
And the album dropped in March 1997, featuring the now iconic The Funk, Around the World, and Revolution 909. It made an instant impact around Europe, with Music magazine calling it one of the most hyped debut albums in a long, long time. Now, the sampling on Homework was all about the loops. Short fragments of music paired with massive drums and clever filtering to keep things interesting. And Revolution 909 is one of the clearest examples of this approach. It's a 5-minute track built almost entirely from one tiny loop, chopped and pitched in just a few different ways. The source, a half bar from Fun Factory's Celebration. Daft Punk sped it up, pitched it higher, then split the highs and lows for full control. From there, it was just about layering those signature drums and riding the filters and even dropping the loop into halftime, squeezing every ounce of energy out of a tiny sample. It's a perfect example of that early style, simple ingredients transformed into something completely new. After Homework, Daft Punk took a step back, giving themselves space to explore side projects and solo experiments. Guy-Man launched the label Cry de More, a lo-fi sample-based label inspired by disco nostalgia. Meanwhile, Thomas had his own breakout moment with the release of Stardust's Music Sounds Better With You, a one-off project that became a massive hit. And after a short break, it was time to get back into album mode. But they didn't want to simply recycle this success of Homework.
Our first album, Homework, met some great reception from an audience and a critical point of view. We were put in a position where we wanted to try to do something different and at the same time to maybe push the limits of some ideas that we had in mind.
Between the first album and the start of Discovery, the duo went through a sort of metamorphosis, or at least that's how the story goes.
We had a little accident with the machines on the 9th of September, 99. And so we had to do some reconstruction with the doctor. That's why we're looking like robots today.
From that moment on, the robot personas were everywhere, in interview, on stage, and in every public appearance. But it wasn't just the visuals that had evolved. The sound changed too. Where Homework leaned on gritty loops and raw energy, Discovery felt like more of a love letter to the music they grew up with.
We don't want to do 15 house tracks because it would be just too repetitive. So we really took it from there and saying, okay, let's try to go in many directions and play with traditional and not conventional song structure and have fun with the technology, going into many different direction styles.
It was also the first time that Daft Punk brought in outside collaborators, most notably Todd Edwards and Rome Anthony. Todd Edwards, a New Jersey native, worked with him on the track Face to Face. A track that blends Daft Punk's melodic edge with Todd's unmistakable chop sample style.
I'm very well known for my cut and paste style and making a musical collage of samples, pasting them together. And a lot of people love to dig for the samples that are in Face to Face. Funny enough, Tomas did a lot of the playing of those samples, but the samples that are in that track, 90% of those samples came from my sample banks. And the palette of samples, it has more to do with my signature than just even how they're arranged.
On Face to Face, Daft Punk and Todd Edwards didn't just sample from one record, they pulled from 22 different songs, slicing them into tiny little fragments and then reassembling them into something completely new. Inside one section of the track, there are 14 samples alone. First up, you've got the drums, a 2-bar loop from Herbie Mann's Disco Daz. Then ELO's Evil Woman. A single guitar strum from Firefall's Body and Soul, and that's pitched up and down the scale to fit. A tiny fragment from Rocky Robin's Nothing Like Love. A short vocal chop from Alan Parsons Project's Silence and I. A guitar strum from Dave Mason's All Along the Watchtower. A synth stab from Steppenwolf's Everybody's Next One. A tiny piece from the Doobie Brothers that keeps you running. More vocals from the Alan Parsons Project. This one's from Old and Wise. A guitar hit from Poco's Faith in the Families. Harmonies from Kenny Loggins and Jim Messina's House at Pooh Corner. A and then some strings and some vocals from ELO's Can't Get It Out of My Head. And when you put all of that together, you get each piece is barely a second long, but chopped, pitched, and sequenced together, they form a sonic collage. 22 different records becoming a single track. But this evolution wasn't just about collaborations or melodies. A lot of what defined Discovery was the gear they were using whilst making it. Among their go-to drum machines was the Roland TR-909, the TR-808, the Lindrum, and the Oberheim DMX. Foundational hardware from house, techno, and pop production. Their secret weapon, the Alesis 3630 compressor, a wallet-friendly rack unit even mocked for its rough sound. In Daft Punk's hands, it became a signature tool in both homework and discovery. And they used it for heavy sidechain compression, creating that rhythmic pumping texture with the kick drum ducking everything else. It became a hallmark of the French house sound. They also leaned on the EMU SP1200 sampler, known for its warm but gritty 12-bit sound. Great for drums and chopping samples in tight loops. Their synth palette included lots of analog Roland gear like the Juno 106, Jupiter 6, TB303, and the sequential Prophet VS. Not ultra modern, but full of that vintage character they were looking for. And their production process also included resampling through an ASR-10 and an S760 sampler, often used more in Discovery than in earlier sessions. Everything on Discovery was chosen with the intention of bringing that warm, vintage, human sound and blending it with their new robotic energy.
I don't think it's completely robot music. It's really now the mix between the machine and the human side of what we are.
Discovery marked the moment that Daft Punk really became Daft Punk. But just a quick break before we dive into the reaction and legacy of the album. If you're into soulful and vintage-inspired samples, we actually make our own sample packs. And you can check those all out on our website. Right now, all the packs are buy one, get one free, and they all feature 10 original compositions. And if you want to grab a couple of those, you can do that by using the code SECONDCOURSE at checkout to grab your free second pack. And the link for that is in the description. Anyway, let's get back to the important stuff. When Discovery dropped in 2001, it caught a lot of people off guard. Gone was the gritty, sample-heavy sound of Homework. In its place, glossy synths, vocoder hooks, and a love letter to 70s and 80s pop. Some fans thought they'd sold out, others saw it as a bold reinvention. But with time, Discovery became one of the most influential albums of the 2000s. Not just in dance music, but in pop, hip-hop, and R&B too. Kanye famously sampled Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger in 2007.
I know I got to be right now, 'cause I can't get much stronger. Man, I've been waiting all night now.
Helping introduce Daft Punk to a whole new audience. And over the years, the albums appeared on countless greatest album lists. But more than that, it became a blueprint. You can hear echoes of Discovery everywhere, in artists like Justice and Chromeo. And Daft Punk have gone on to collaborate with major stars like The Weeknd, Kanye West, Pharrell. Homework helped put Daft Punk on the map, but Discovery cemented them in the culture. And if you're a producer looking for a place to share your music, trade samples, or just ask questions, we've just launched a new Discord community, and we'd love to see some of you in there. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments if there are any other artists or albums you'd like me to look at next.